My father slapped me, and I was told to smile for the cameras like nothing ever happened. In a revelation that's sending shockwaves through the monarchy, Princess Charlotte, yes, the young royal raised in the public's loving gaze, has broken her silence with a statement no one saw coming. Behind palace walls, she claims, perfection was a performance, and pain was kept a secret. Her words are raw, haunting, and directed at the future king, her own father, Prince William. Why now? What triggered this emotional confession? And how deep does this go? Stay with us as we uncover the truth behind the royal curtain, because once you hear what Charlotte said next, you'll never look at the royal family the same way again. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. What if the image of a perfect royal family, a loving father, a graceful mother, well-behaved children dressed in charm and royalty was just that? An image, carefully curated for cameras, polished for headlines, and protected by an unspoken code of silence? What if behind those grand palace walls, one voice, young, vulnerable, and ignored, finally decided enough was enough? That voice belongs to Princess Charlotte. In a world where royalty is taught to smile, wave, and never speak out, Charlotte just did the unthinkable. She broke her silence. In a private but verified account now spreading like wildfire, the daughter of Prince William and Princess Catherine has reportedly said something that no one saw coming. Not the media, not the public, and certainly not the royal family. She said, "My father slapped me. I was told never to speak of it, but I'm tired of pretending everything's perfect." No one is pretending now. The monarchy, known for its tight-lipped traditions and carefully measured public appearances, now finds itself at the center of a storm. One they can't silence. One that didn't come from the press, or a scandalous documentary, or even an angry relative across the ocean. It came from a child. A princess. The future of the House of Windsor. This isn't just another headline. This is a seismic shift. In the next few minutes, we're going to peel back the layers of control, tradition, and secrecy to uncover what really happened inside Kensington Palace. We'll trace the story from the moment the shocking words were spoken, through the tangled reactions of those closest to the throne, to the quiet but growing questions echoing across Britain and the world. What kind of father is Prince William? What kind of legacy is being built behind the gates of monarchy? And most importantly, who will protect the voiceless when the crown stays silent? This is not a tabloid tale. It's a confrontation with something raw, something real. A confrontation with the truth. The royal family is no stranger to controversy. From Princess Diana's heartbreaking confessions to Prince Harry's recent revelations, the Windsors have survived decades of scandal, heartbreak, and internal warfare. But never, never, has the voice of a child so closely tied to the line of succession come forward with such clarity, courage, and consequence. To understand how we got here, we must start by examining the polished illusion of royal perfection, a performance refined over generations. The institution is built on the idea of dignity, stability, and unshakable unity. Smiling Christmas portraits, flawless weddings, carefully choreographed public appearances. Even when tragedy strikes, the script rarely changes. Duty, composure, silence. But this time, the silence has been broken. And it wasn't an exiled prince with a Netflix deal or a disgraced uncle embroiled in controversy. It was a young girl who simply said what she felt. And that honesty, that rawness, that small flicker of rebellion against the tightly wound expectations of royalty may have just ripped a hole through Buckingham Palace's most sacred armor, its image. Let's be clear, this isn't just about a slap. It's about the pressure to be perfect, the weight of expectation, the suffocating demand for obedience, and the invisible bruises left by power that is absolute behind closed doors. Charlotte's words are more than an accusation. They are a cry for oxygen in a room with no windows, a call for acknowledgement in a house of mirrors. She didn't just speak against her father, she spoke against the machine. The one that tells her to smile for the camera. The one that punishes disobedience with silence. The one that makes even a child believe that her pain should be locked away to protect an image. How does a child come to believe that her truth is more dangerous than her silence? That question, more than anything, is why this story matters. Because if the daughter of the future king feels she must pretend, then what does that say about the rest of the royal family? What does that say about the institution's grip on the personal, the emotional, and the human? And more urgently, what does that say about the monarchy's future? In this video, we're not only going to explore the incident, we're going to explore the system that made it possible. A system where public perception is worth more than personal healing, where titles are sacred, but truth is expendable. We'll explore the origins of this revelation, how it surfaced, who leaked it, why it's being dismissed by some and feared by others. We'll look at the psychological toll such institutions can take on children forced to grow up in front of the world while being emotionally muzzled in private. We'll dive into the royal family's historical playbook of damage control, the strategic silences, and the expertly timed diversions. We'll ask the questions many are too afraid to ask. Did this really happen the way Charlotte says it did? If so, what are the consequences? And even more crucially, what happens next for her? The power of this story lies not just in its shock value, but in its emotional gravity. Because for all their power and privilege, the royal family is, at its core, a family. And when a child speaks of pain inflicted by a parent, that pain is universal. It transcends bloodlines, titles, and thrones. It reminds us that no matter how grand the castle, the echoes of trauma can still rattle its halls. We will be speaking to royal experts, child psychologists, former palace aides, and people who have lived in the shadows of royal institutions. We'll gather perspectives, not to throw stones, but to understand. Because truth does not need to be shouted, it just needs to be heard. This moment with Princess Charlotte may mark a pivotal shift, not only in how the public views Prince William as a future monarch, but in how we talk about power, accountability, and family within the most sacred British institution. So stay with us as we journey beyond the surface, beyond the royal smiles, beyond the press releases, into the truth that no palace press secretary can edit or erase. Charlotte's words are already echoing far louder than any denial, and those echoes may change everything. There's a certain magic the public associates with being born into royalty. Fairy tales, royal titles, and global fame wrap the lives of royal children in a dazzling package that feels more cinematic than real. From the moment Princess Charlotte was born in May of 2015, the world was watching. Her first photos were shared across continents. Her tiny face graced the covers of tabloids and trended on social media. Her dresses were copied, her expressions analyzed, her every move documented by thousands of camera lenses. To the outside world, it appeared that Charlotte was living a dream. A princess with doting parents, a charming older brother, and a younger sibling who completed the picturesque royal trio. Her family was always styled to perfection, their appearances choreographed with the elegance and poise expected of modern royalty. Birthdays were celebrated with public messages and carefully selected photos. Her first day of school became international news. She waved like a seasoned diplomat during state events, and she smiled with precision during ceremonies most children her age would struggle to sit through. But none of that reveals what happens when the cameras are gone. Behind the smiles, Charlotte was raised in one of the most scrutinized and regimented environments in the world. Her father, Prince William, is not just a dad. He's the heir to the British throne. Her mother, Catherine, is not just a mom. She's a future queen consort. Every decision regarding Charlotte's upbringing carried implications. Every behavioral slip had potential to become scandal. Every whisper of rebellion could invite judgment from a global audience. So, how do you parent under that kind of spotlight? Royal insiders have long whispered about the expectations placed upon William and Kate's children. While the couple publicly emphasizes normalcy behind palace walls, discipline is paramount. Staff are instructed to enforce schedules with military precision. Mealtimes, nap times, schooling, and public behavior are carefully monitored. One former royal nanny, who requested anonymity, described the household as loving, but under intense pressure. Every moment is controlled to preserve the family image. Charlotte, being strong-willed and outspoken, was never the child to blindly conform. Even as a toddler, observers noticed how she often appeared more assertive than her brother George. Clips circulated of her politely correcting photographers or asserting herself during royal events. The media playfully dubbed her sassy, but those close to the family suggested that behind the scenes, her spirited nature occasionally clashed with her father's strict, legacy-bound expectations. Prince William, shaped by his own royal upbringing and the burden of becoming king, is said to have inherited his father Charles's formality and emotional restraint. While he has made visible efforts to modernize the monarchy and present a warmer image to the public, those efforts are still bound by centuries of institutional rigidity. Royal parenting isn't just about love, it's about control, optics, and training heirs for a future most adults can't imagine, let alone children. Imagine being 5 years old and knowing your smile must be timed, your comments filtered, and your behavior constantly monitored. For Charlotte, this wasn't occasional, it was daily life. Her role as a royal child demanded grace, obedience, and silence. But she was never just any child. Sources close to the family have described Charlotte as deeply intelligent, emotionally aware, and inquisitive beyond her years. According to a palace aide who worked in the household until late 2023, Charlotte asked questions no one expected. She'd challenge rules, not disrespectfully, but in a way that showed she was aware something didn't feel right. One such moment reportedly occurred during a private family gathering when Charlotte asked why she always had to wear a smile when she didn't feel like it. The question, though innocent, was met with silence. One adult allegedly responded, "Because the world is watching, darling, and they don't want to see us frown." That answer, whether meant to protect or suppress, says everything about the world Charlotte was being raised in. She was learning early that her emotions were subordinate to appearance, that her feelings needed to be filtered for public consumption, that the expectations of the throne outweighed her personal truth. And yet, unlike most royal children before her, she began to quietly question that structure. This questioning spirit, while endearing to some within the palace, reportedly caused friction with William. Though he adores his children, insiders say that he views parenting through the lens of responsibility to the crown. "William isn't abusive," said one former staffer, "but he's firm. Very firm. When he says something, he expects it to be followed immediately, without negotiation. And it's that expectation, immediate, unconditional compliance, that may have clashed with Charlotte's developing independence." In one incident described anonymously by a former palace gardener, Charlotte was overheard arguing with a nanny over being forced to participate in a photo session she didn't want to attend. The child reportedly said, "Why do I have to smile if I don't feel happy?" The moment was brushed aside at the time, but it raised eyebrows among staff who saw it not as defiance, but as resistance against the heavy mask of royal performance. That resistance, however, was rarely encouraged. Charlotte was taught, as all royal children are, that public image is sacred. The slightest emotional deviation, a tear, a frown, a pout, could trigger headlines. So she learned to hold it in. She learned to perform. But the cost of that performance, especially on a child not inclined to suppress herself, builds over time. What happens when a child feels they cannot express themselves honestly? What happens when discipline turns from correction into suppression? Psychologists who study royal families and child development in high-profile environments warn of long-term effects. Dr. Eliza Manning, a leading child trauma specialist in London, explains. Children raised in institutions where image is prioritized over emotion often develop internalized shame. They come to believe that natural emotional reactions are flaws. Over time, this suppresses self-worth and can create long-lasting psychological damage. Charlotte, despite all her privilege, may have been navigating exactly that kind of environment. And while the world saw adorable birthday portraits, behind those curated images was a child struggling to reconcile who she was with what she was expected to be. The gap between public perception and private experience only widened as she got older. As Charlotte matured, insiders say she began to pull away from palace routine. She reportedly started questioning authority more often, particularly when orders conflicted with how she felt. At times, these questions were met with patience. Other times, reportedly, they were not. One source suggested that a heated exchange between Charlotte and her father occurred in late 2024. No staff member directly witnessed the alleged physical moment, but word of a particularly tense encounter began circulating among household employees. "There was a silence the day after," said one maid. "No one spoke of it, but everyone knew something had happened." That something, if Charlotte's recent quote is to be taken at face value, may have been the moment she now refers to when she says, "My father slapped me." The context is still unclear. Was it disciplinary? Was it reactive? Was it symbolic of a greater pattern, or an isolated incident? What's clear is that to Charlotte, it mattered enough to finally speak up. And the reason she gave, the phrase that now hangs heavy in the air, was this: "I was told never to speak of it, but I'm tired of pretending everything's perfect." The weight of that statement cannot be overstated. It's not just an accusation. It's a rejection of the narrative she was raised in, a narrative built on obedience, polish, and pageantry. By speaking out, Charlotte didn't just name a single moment, she shattered the foundation of an entire illusion. And now, the world must look again. No child forgets the day their trust is broken by the person they admire most. For Princess Charlotte, that day isn't marked by public ceremony or royal duty. It is a private wound, hidden under layers of formality and denial, and only now beginning to surface. The moment she described with a trembling voice, according to a leaked source close to the family, was both sudden and silent. It didn't come during a major event, nor did it unfold under flashing cameras or cheering crowds. It happened within the hushed, echoing walls of Kensington Palace, a place so heavily guarded, not even the truth is allowed to escape freely. It was late autumn, reportedly a gray afternoon where clouds hung low over the palace grounds. Charlotte, age 9 at the time, was home from her private tutoring session. The house was quieter than usual. Prince George had been taken to a school event, and little Prince Louis was with a nanny in the nursery. According to one member of the palace domestic staff who later confided in a journalist under the condition of anonymity, tensions had been building for days. William had been under pressure, preparing for a high-profile international trip, juggling meetings with advisors, and managing the increased workload after King Charles's declining health forced him to take on more royal responsibilities. The mood in the household was, in the words of a footman, like walking on broken glass. Every step, you expected a snap. Charlotte, who had grown increasingly resistant to the tightly scheduled structure imposed on her, reportedly voiced a strong refusal that afternoon. The confrontation, sources claim, began in the family study. She was told she needed to prepare for a formal appearance later that week. A planned photo opportunity at a children's hospital, where she was expected to accompany her parents. Charlotte had apparently said she didn't want to go, not because of illness or fatigue, but because she felt she was being used. According to the same insider, Charlotte had told the tutor days earlier, "I don't like smiling when I don't feel it. It's fake. I'm not a doll." The statement, while innocent, echoed something far deeper, a young girl beginning to see the strings attached to her position. When she voiced this hesitation again, this time directly to her father, things escalated. Details of the confrontation remain murky. No official documentation exists. No footage has emerged. But the staff who were present said they heard raised voices. Charlotte's, in particular, cut through the hallways, followed by the sharp thud of something hitting a surface, a book, a chair, or possibly a door. Then, silence. What happened in those next moments would become the center of the storm. According to what Charlotte later confided in a trusted confidant, a former caregiver no longer employed by the palace, Prince William, in a fit of frustration, raised his hand and slapped her. Not violently, not with intent to injure, but in a moment of anger that left the young girl frozen in place. The source claimed Charlotte didn't cry immediately. She didn't scream. She just stood still, stunned, as the weight of the moment crashed over her. William reportedly left the room abruptly, leaving her alone. Later that evening, the family appeared together at dinner, as though nothing had happened. This kind of emotional dissonance, where pain must be buried quickly under a layer of royal performance, is common in high-pressure environments. But for a child, it's confusing, frightening, and unforgettable. According to the same confidant, Charlotte didn't speak of it for weeks. But the shift in her demeanor was noticed by those closest to her. She became quieter during family meals, avoided eye contact with William, and appeared reluctant to join in rehearsals for public appearances. Her smile, always praised by the press for its natural charm, began to look forced. Her posture became more rigid. She clung more tightly to her mother's side during events. The phrase that would later come to define her breaking point, "I was told never to speak of it," was reportedly first uttered after a conversation with her mother. Sources close to the situation suggest that Kate, while devastated, asked her daughter to keep the incident private, not out of malice or denial, but out of a deep fear for the family's reputation and William's public image. She had spent years cultivating an image of calm, unity, and maternal perfection. She was caught between her role as a protector of her child and her duty as the future queen consort. Charlotte, heartbroken by this request for silence, did what many children in emotional conflict do. She retreated inward. It wasn't until months later, during a conversation with someone she trusted outside the palace, that she finally voiced the truth. The words, though spoken softly, carried the weight of generations of suppression. She said, "He slapped me, and I wasn't allowed to say anything. I was told never to speak of it, but I'm tired of pretending everything's perfect." That single sentence traveled from one ear to another, until it made its way into a journalist's notes. That journalist, while careful to protect identities and verify sources, eventually presented the story to a royal news outlet. The palace, as expected, refused to comment. But the damage was already done. For the first time, the world was confronted with a version of Prince William that had never been seen before. Not the dutiful son, the charming husband, or the polished prince, but a father, overwhelmed, who had failed in a moment of weakness. Critics immediately called the story speculative, irresponsible, even fabricated. But others recognized the ring of truth in Charlotte's words. Not because they wanted to believe the worst, but because the royal family, for all its prestige, is not immune to the realities of human emotion and human failure. A slap may seem minor to some, a moment of lost temper, a disciplinary gesture taken too far. But for a child, especially one raised in a family where appearances are everything, it carries a message that is far more destructive than physical pain. It tells the child, your truth does not matter. Your discomfort must be hidden. Your story must be buried for the sake of others. Charlotte's decision to speak up is not just an act of defiance. It is a rebellion against a system that has demanded silence from women, children, and spouses for generations. Her words mark a departure from the narrative crafted around her, a narrative of innocence, privilege, and politeness. In that single quote, she claimed her voice, her experience, and her right to no longer perform a lie. This incident also opens up a broader conversation, one about what discipline looks like in modern royalty. Where is the line between correction and coercion? What standards should apply to those raised in palaces but still bound by the laws and ethics of the real world? In private households, even a single incident like this might lead to interventions, counseling, or at the very least, open discussion. But in the monarchy, those options are far less accessible. The priority is not emotional healing, it's public preservation. This is why Charlotte's decision to speak out, even in a limited, careful way, carries such extraordinary power. She has broken not just a personal silence, but a cultural one. And now, there's no going back. Silence has always been the invisible glue that holds the British royal family together. Unspoken rules, veiled glances, and carefully timed statements form the foundation of what many inside the palace refer to as the Code. This code doesn't appear in any handbook. It is not taught in school. Yet from the moment a royal child learns to speak, they also learn not to. For Princess Charlotte, born into a monarchy that thrives on image and order, that code was part of her world before she could even understand it. While her early years seemed enchanted to the outside observer, they were laced with subtle lessons that every member of the Windsor family learns early. Do not contradict, do not expose, and above all, do not speak publicly about internal matters. The strength of the crown, they are told, lies not in its transparency, but in its mystery. The royal code of silence is not new. It is a tradition rooted in centuries of crisis management. When scandal threatens to seep into the open, the default response is simple: close the ranks. The less said, the less damage done. This has been the palace's mantra through divorces, affairs, mental health breakdowns, and even deaths. Silence is protection. Silence is loyalty. Silence, above all, is survival. The late Queen Elizabeth II famously embodied this principle. Her public rule was clear: never complain, never explain. Her legacy was one of stoicism, discretion, and emotional containment. She believed in duty over drama. And that belief flowed down to her children, and now her grandchildren. Prince William, raised under that same doctrine, was conditioned to maintain composure no matter the circumstance. His own upbringing was marked by emotional suppression, particularly during the traumatic years following Princess Diana's death. William walked behind his mother's coffin at just 15, stone-faced and silent, as millions watched. That was the expectation. Dignity in pain, silence in sorrow. It's no surprise then that William, now a father himself, would expect the same of his own children. But times have changed. The world has changed. And perhaps most importantly, the next generation of royals, Charlotte, George, and Louis, are growing up in an era where silence is no longer celebrated the way it once was. Still, the code remains. When Charlotte allegedly said, "I was told never to speak of it," she wasn't just recalling a family rule. She was describing the crown's oldest and most sacred tradition: containment. According to insiders familiar with royal protocol, children are gently but firmly taught to self-censor from a very young age. They are praised for good posture, quiet obedience, and keeping their thoughts private. One former governess, who worked briefly within the royal nursery, explained, "It's not that they're forbidden from expressing themselves, but they are constantly reminded that their words have consequences, that anything they say could be twisted, misinterpreted, or worse, used against the family. The result is a kind of emotional tightrope. Children like Charlotte learn to balance their thoughts between authenticity and responsibility. They learn which truths are safe to share and which must be buried. In public, they become expert performers, mirroring the smiles and pleasantries expected of them, even when they don't feel them. But eventually, the weight of that performance becomes unbearable." Charlotte's decision to speak was not just a personal act of defiance. It was a break in the code, a crack in the palace's protective shield, and it has left the royal family reeling, not just from the content of her statement, but from the precedent it may set. If Charlotte, a child, can speak out, what does that mean for others within the royal system who have stayed quiet for decades? The monarchy has long relied on internal loyalty to keep scandals contained. Most conflicts are resolved behind closed doors, often never reaching the press. Staff are sworn to secrecy. Family members are pressured into unity. And when public rumors do surface, official statements are vague, emotionally detached, and strategically calculated. The moment anyone steps outside that system, they are branded a threat. We saw it with Princess Diana, whose explosive interviews in the 1990s broke centuries of silence. She exposed the emotional vacuum of palace life and paid a high price for it. Publicly loved, but internally isolated. We saw it again with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, whose decision to share their emotional struggles with the world was seen as both revolutionary and treacherous. Now, it's happening again. Only this time, it's not a princess by marriage or a rebellious prince. It's a child, born directly into the line of succession, simply telling the truth as she sees it. The impact is deeper because Charlotte has no political motivation, no agenda, no documentary deal or interview contract. Her words cut through the noise precisely because of their innocence. They weren't crafted in a PR war. They were whispered in pain. And that makes them more dangerous than any book or broadcast ever could be. The royal family's response so far has been predictable: silence. No public comment. No private acknowledgement. Only controlled smiles at recent appearances and a flurry of behind-the-scenes activity to reassert the image of a happy family. Palace staff have reportedly been instructed to avoid discussing the incident, and family routines have been tightened to prevent further leaks. But controlling the narrative has become harder in the age of social media. Whispered truths spread faster than official statements. Public opinion, once shaped solely by the press, is now driven by viral conversations and emotional resonance. And the public is listening to Charlotte. Many parents see in her a reflection of their own children, fragile, honest, and sometimes silenced. They recognize the injustice of asking a child to suppress a painful experience to protect adult reputations. They are not just angry at William. They are disappointed in an institution that continues to demand loyalty over healing. Meanwhile, supporters of the monarchy insist that children's memories are unreliable, that Charlotte may have misunderstood the situation, and that such internal matters should never be aired in public. But even these defenders struggle to ignore the broader truth that the royal family is out of step with a culture that increasingly values openness, transparency, and emotional accountability. Charlotte's quiet act of courage could very well ignite a shift, not just within the monarchy, but within all institutions that rely on silence to preserve their image. Her words are a reminder that behind every powerful system are individuals, human beings with feelings, flaws, and voices. The code of silence may still exist, but now it's under threat. And that may be the most revolutionary part of this story. To the public, Prince William has always seemed to walk the fine line between duty and devotion. He is the son of Diana, the heir to the throne, the polished face of a modern monarchy. He is the family man, the global diplomat, the steady presence at the Queen's side during her final years. But inside the palace, and behind the ceremonial smiles, there is another layer to him. One shaped by trauma, responsibility, and impossible expectations. The duality of Prince William is a defining element of this story. On one hand, he is a father to 3 young children. On the other, he is the future King of England. These two roles, while not mutually exclusive, often pull in opposing directions. Fatherhood demands softness, patience, and vulnerability. Royalty demands strength, structure, and unwavering control. And it is within this constant tension that William has had to define himself. People who know William describe him as deeply protective. Those close to him say he idolizes the idea of a stable family, precisely because he grew up in one fractured by scandal, infidelity, and global scrutiny. He saw his mother cry in front of cameras. He lived through the disintegration of his parents' marriage, endured the tabloid cruelty, and carried the weight of the public's grief after Diana's death. Those formative years left him with a deep, perhaps obsessive, desire to shield his own children from anything resembling the chaos of his own childhood. But that shield comes with consequences. According to former palace aides and advisors who've worked with William, his desire for order and stability sometimes translates into rigid control over his family life. He is known to schedule activities down to the minute, insist on formal protocols at home, and become visibly agitated when things stray from plan. While his public persona is one of warmth and relatability, insiders say there is a colder, stricter tone that emerges behind closed doors, especially when he feels the weight of public pressure. Charlotte, strong-willed and outspoken, may have triggered this side of him more than his other children. Where George is reportedly more reserved and Louis still young and impressionable, Charlotte pushes boundaries. She questions routines. She challenges the system, even subtly. That kind of independence, while admirable in any other household, is problematic in the royal structure, where deference and obedience are prized above assertiveness. One former nanny, who left her post in 2023, recounted several moments where William and Charlotte clashed, not violently, but philosophically. She described one instance where Charlotte asked why she had to wear a specific dress for a photo session. William, rather than offering a patient explanation, reportedly responded with a curt reminder, "Because that is what is expected of you." That phrase, "what is expected," repeats itself in various ways throughout the household. Charlotte's questioning of expectations, though common for children, began to create tension. Not because she was rebellious in the traditional sense, but because she was honest. She asked questions that had no satisfactory answers in the royal world. Why must we pretend? Why can't we show how we feel? Why does everyone expect me to smile? For William, these questions may have hit too close to home. He has spent his life pretending, smiling through grief, smiling through royal scandals, smiling when the press tore his family apart. His entire public existence has been built on the assumption that showing emotion is weakness. That duty comes before discomfort. That silence protects. And now, his daughter was asking him to do what he had never been allowed to do, to be emotionally transparent. It is possible, even likely, that this conflict played a role in the now infamous moment Charlotte described. A moment where William's frustration boiled over, not just because his daughter refused a task, but because she had unknowingly held a mirror to his own pain. In that moment, he wasn't Prince William. He wasn't the next king. He was a man raised in an emotionally repressive environment, reacting with the only tools he was given, authority and control. This doesn't excuse the act. It doesn't minimize the harm. But it does help us understand it. Fatherhood is not immune to generational cycles. Trauma, when left unaddressed, often repeats itself. William, by all accounts, has worked hard to break from the cold parenting style of past monarchs. But when pressured, when stretched too thin, old patterns emerge. In children, particularly those as emotionally tuned as Charlotte, notice. One of the most tragic aspects of this dynamic is the parallel between William and his own father, King Charles. Charles was often accused of being emotionally distant, unable to connect with his sons on a deeper level. William, determined not to be like him, now finds himself in danger of repeating those same missteps, not out of cruelty, but out of a misunderstanding of how to be both royal and real. This is the crisis at the heart of the royal family. How to humanize an institution that has, for centuries, been built on formality over feeling. The monarchy trains its heirs to be symbols, not people. They are coached on posture, protocol, and public speaking long before they are allowed to explore their emotional selves. William's own emotional development was stunted by tragedy and pressure. His mother's sudden death, the media circus that followed, and the constant expectations left little room for healing. He had to become the man of the house at 15. He had to be composed, even when his world was falling apart. Now, as a father, you may believe that composure is the most loving thing he can teach. That preparing his children to face a brutal, judgmental world means demanding discipline and stoicism. But Charlotte's voice cuts through that belief. Her pain reveals the cracks in that strategy. Her decision to speak, and to name what happened, may feel like betrayal to William. But it may also be the very thing that forces him to reevaluate what kind of father he wants to be. Not just for public appearances, but in the quiet moments when no cameras are rolling. When the crown is off. When his daughter is looking at him not as a prince, but as a man she hopes will listen. This section of the story is not just about a single moment of conflict. It is about two people, father and daughter, caught in the gravitational pull of a centuries-old system that demands silence and conformity. It is about the tension between legacy and love, between discipline and dignity, between duty and empathy. William the Prince is a man shaped by protocol, responsibility, and the crushing expectations of an inherited future. William the Father is a man trying, perhaps imperfectly, to protect his children from the very thing that scarred him. But in trying to protect them with silence and structure, he may be repeating the wound. And now, his daughter is asking him, begging him to see her, to hear her, to believe that pretending everything's perfect is no longer enough. Children adapt to their environment with astonishing speed, especially when that environment is one of high expectations and limited emotional expression. In Princess Charlotte's case, this adaptation wasn't a matter of choice. It was survival. From her earliest years, Charlotte was trained to be a symbol. Her gestures were studied, her attire scrutinized, her behavior celebrated or dissected depending on whether it aligned with the image the public expected. While most children have the luxury of growing up quietly, Charlotte was born into a world where her every step came with commentary. But beneath the smiling photographs and polished public appearances was a child experiencing a very different reality. Insiders have shared that Charlotte, though naturally bright and expressive, learned early on that not all emotions were welcome in her world. Tantrums were unacceptable. Crying was considered a lapse in composure. Expressing disagreement in public was discouraged. Instead, she was taught to pause, smile, and redirect, tactics not of a child learning to self-regulate, but of a performer learning her cues. Behind the palace walls, her growing silence became more pronounced. Former staff members observed that while George was more reserved and Louis still too young to sense the depth of expectations placed upon them, Charlotte displayed a visible shift in demeanor after key public engagements. According to one household aide, there was a difference in her after each appearance. Like a part of her was being chipped away every time she had to wave or curtsy on command. These small erosions of identity can accumulate in children raised in hyper-controlled environments. Dr. Helena Cartwright, a child psychologist specializing in institutional families, explains that the suppression of natural emotional responses can lead to internal conflict. When children are repeatedly told, either directly or indirectly, that their true feelings are inconvenient or inappropriate, they learn to distrust those feelings. They begin to edit themselves not for maturity, but for acceptability. Charlotte's editing began early. Those close to the family describe her as naturally opinionated, unafraid to speak her mind within safe circles. But as time passed, she spoke less freely. Her questions became fewer, her emotional responses more muted. Even her joy, once exuberant, seemed rehearsed. There were moments, however, when the mask slipped. One such moment reportedly occurred during a private charity event. A photographer captured a candid image of Charlotte, eyes downcast, lips pressed together tightly, standing slightly behind her family. The photo never made it to official royal channels but circulated briefly among staff. One palace employee remarked, "That wasn't the usual Charlotte. That was a girl trying hard not to cry." It's easy to underestimate the emotional labor required of children in the public eye. Every wave, every posed smile, every forced handshake chips away at authenticity. And for someone like Charlotte, who had a natural instinct for honesty, the conflict between her public role and private self created a constant internal strain. Her struggle didn't go unnoticed by those around her. Kate, always attentive, reportedly tried to carve out moments of normalcy, bedtime stories, unscheduled playtime, private family outings. But even these efforts were colored by the ever-present awareness that their lives were under surveillance. What they wore, where they went, how the children behaved, none of it escaped commentary. And so, Charlotte learned not only to control her expressions, but to anticipate how those expressions would be received. This anticipatory anxiety, common in children under pressure, can lead to deeper psychological issues if unaddressed. Charlotte's tutors reportedly noticed a shift in her focus. Once excited to learn and engage, she became more withdrawn in sessions where emotional expression was required. In storytelling exercises, she chose tales about quiet girls who kept secrets. In group discussions, she deferred to others even when she had answers. These may seem like small details, But in a child who once led conversations and asked fearless questions, the shift was telling. It became most visible during rehearsals for major public appearances. One former staff member described Charlotte's preparation for a Christmas service where she was expected to recite a short greeting. She practiced it perfectly, but you could see the hesitation. Not in the words, but in her eyes. Like she was bracing for something. This bracing, this emotional flinching, is often a sign of inner conflict. Children who feel unsupported in expressing their true selves often begin to internalize a belief that their feelings are liabilities. For Charlotte, the message was clear: she must be pleasant, polished, and silent. And then came the moment of confrontation. The day she told someone trusted that her father had slapped her was not a loud, dramatic explosion. It was quiet, calculated. The words, when she spoke them, carried the weight of months, perhaps years, of accumulated confusion, fear, and emotional restraint. According to that source, Charlotte's voice was calm. She didn't cry. She didn't whisper. She just said it. He slapped me. I was told never to speak of it, but I'm tired of pretending everything's perfect. This was not just a confession. It was an act of release. For the first time, Charlotte named the contradiction she had lived in for so long. She named the pain of being taught to silence herself. She named the injustice of being told that her discomfort was secondary to the family's public image. And in doing so, she broke the very rule that had governed her young life. Children don't always have the vocabulary to express trauma, but they feel it, and they find ways to voice it, whether through behavior, silence, or eventually, speech. Charlotte had finally found her way to speak. What followed was not public fallout, but private distancing. According to Palace insiders, Charlotte became quieter after the confession. Not out of fear of punishment, but out of uncertainty. She had spoken a truth, and now she waited to see if it would be acknowledged or erased. For a time, it was the latter. The palace's silence was swift and suffocating. There was no confrontation, no formal reprimand, no family intervention, just a quiet rearranging of routines, an increased presence of handlers, and subtle but unmistakable attempts to restore the illusion. But the damage was done. Charlotte, having spoken, could no longer return to the world where silence was safety. She had crossed an invisible line, and though she didn't shout or protest, her quiet defiance echoed louder than any press release. The tragedy is not that she experienced pain. It's that she was conditioned to think she couldn't talk about it. Her silent struggle is one that many children, royal or not, can relate to. The pressure to be perfect. The expectation to keep family secrets. The belief that love must be earned through obedience. These are burdens too heavy for any child to carry. And yet, Charlotte carried them, until she didn't. In any other household, a child's confession of mistreatment might lead to a quiet family reckoning, perhaps counseling, perhaps apology, certainly a moment of introspection. But in a palace, especially one guarded not only by security personnel but by centuries of tradition and secrecy, the reaction is far more calculated. What Charlotte revealed was already earth-shaking on its own. But according to sources familiar with the inner workings of the royal household, her statement may not be the only evidence that exists. Whispers have begun to circulate about the presence of recordings, audio clips, perhaps even video captured either intentionally or inadvertently, that may corroborate or further illuminate the incident she described. The notion of leaked recordings inside a royal residence may sound improbable, even absurd. After all, security at places like Kensington Palace is among the tightest in the world. Every visitor is screened. Every room is regularly swept for surveillance. But even in the most controlled environments, small lapses occur, especially when technology is everywhere and staff turnover is constant. According to one source who worked briefly in logistics for a private royal event, palace aides often use secure internal communication systems, including walkie-talkies and private phone lines. However, during family interactions in residential wings, especially those involving children, the level of formality can drop. Staff use personal devices for scheduling, tracking, and sometimes informal documentation for internal use, such as recording moments for private family archives or reviewing performance protocols for public events. It is within this gray area of informal recording that a theory has emerged. There are claims, still unconfirmed but persistent, that during the period when Charlotte reportedly had her confrontation with her father, a staff member in a nearby room had their personal phone recording. The reason, they say, was innocuous. The individual was said to be preparing documentation for a holiday event, recording notes and instructions while moving through the family wing. What was captured in the background, allegedly, was not part of any official documentation, but it might have included raised voices, and more controversially, the moment Charlotte later referred to as the slap. The existence of such a recording has become a point of speculation within both media circles and royal staff. No tape has been released. No official confirmation has been made. But multiple journalists, particularly those in close contact with former palace aides, have acknowledged off the record that they've heard about something substantial that would justify the sudden tightening of press access to the children in recent months. There are additional rumors of written communication, emails between aides, internal reports of household disturbances, even potential mentions in incident logs maintained by private security. Though such documents are never meant to be public, leaks in recent years have become more frequent, especially when former staff exit under strained conditions. But the most haunting possibility involves a conversation between Charlotte and a caregiver, possibly a tutor or private counselor, in which she again mentioned the incident, this time in more detail, and reportedly in a session that was transcribed for professional records. Therapists and child psychologists working with public figures are often bound by strict confidentiality, but they also maintain notes to track a child's mental and emotional progress. One former child development expert, who once consulted for the royal family, explained that when children express experiences of emotional or physical harm, even if minor, professionals are required to document them. These records, she noted, are stored securely but do exist. And this is what has alarmed some within the palace structure. It's not just Charlotte's words. It's the possibility that those words are supported by tangible evidence. If audio exists, even partially, it would represent a seismic threat to the palace. Not because it would confirm abuse, but because it would disrupt the carefully cultivated image of a harmonious royal family. Even the sound of anger in William's voice, devoid of physical proof, would be enough to trigger global scrutiny. It would shatter the myth of perfection and open the gates to a flood of questions the palace is not prepared to answer. The media, while cautious, has begun to circle. Certain tabloids have increased their inquiries around Charlotte's schooling and mental health support. More mainstream outlets are treading carefully, unsure whether to treat the story as credible or speculative. But as with any major royal controversy, the whispers are getting louder. The longer the palace remains silent, the more oxygen is given to rumor. This silence, however, is not without strategy. Historically, the royal family's refusal to comment on scandals has served them well. By denying a platform to every claim, they reduce the risk of legitimizing them. But in today's media landscape, silence can be interpreted as guilt. And with speculation about recordings growing, the vacuum is being filled by suspicion. There's also the question of timing. Why now? Why would such information, if it exists, begin to circulate now? Some believe it's a result of shifting dynamics within the palace. With King Charles facing health challenges and William taking on more responsibilities, tensions among staff have reportedly increased. Staff changes always increase the risk of leaks, especially when those dismissed or demoted feel mistreated. One anonymous source suggested that a former employee, let go under questionable circumstances, may be considering releasing sensitive material to a foreign media outlet, one not bound by UK press restrictions. There's another theory, darker still. Some speculate that the leak is not external but internal. A move, potentially orchestrated by individuals within the institution who fear the consolidation of power under William. These internal players, more loyal to tradition than any single royal, may view Charlotte's story as a means of slowing William's momentum. If his character can be questioned now, before he ascends the throne, the influence he wields might be curtailed. Regardless of origin, the potential of any recording is not just explosive, it's irreversible. Should such material surface, even in part, the public reaction would be swift. Social media would erupt. International media would swarm. Advocacy groups would demand action. And most importantly, Charlotte would be thrust into a spotlight far more intense than any she has ever known. That is the real tragedy of this chapter. She did not ask for her words to become a media weapon. She did not leak anything herself. Her confession, shared in what she believed was a safe space, has now become the center of a potential scandal. And in the frenzy to confirm or disprove recordings, her voice risks being lost in the noise. Her story, whether supported by audio or not, is already powerful. The fact that she spoke, that she found the courage to break through generations of silence should be the focus. Yet in the race for evidence, her humanity is in danger of being commodified. Still, the existence of supporting material cannot be ignored. In today's digital world, secrets are rarely buried for long. And if recordings, messages, or transcriptions exist, the question is no longer if they will emerge, but when. When that moment comes, the palace will face a choice. Continue its tradition of silence, or acknowledge that even in the most controlled institution on earth, truth has a way of slipping through the cracks. Princess Catherine, the Duchess of Cambridge, is the epitome of grace under pressure. Known for her poise, warmth, and unwavering public support of her husband, Prince William, she has long been seen as the perfect royal wife and mother. To the public, her role has seemed simple: the supportive spouse, the ever-smiling mother of three, the dutiful future queen consort who quietly fulfills her royal obligations. But behind that image lies a far more complex reality, one that finds her torn between her loyalty to her husband and her fierce devotion to her children. Kate's position has always been precarious. She is, after all, not just the wife of the future king, but a woman who has always placed family first. Her early years in the royal family, marked by her understated public role and her slow integration into royal life, were a study in balancing personal identity with the crushing expectations of the monarchy. And while she has managed to maintain a remarkably stable public persona, the cracks, small but telling, are beginning to show, especially with Charlotte's recent revelations. The truth is that Kate, for all her grace, is not immune to the difficulties of living within such a charged, scrutinized environment. She is a mother first and a wife second, but both of those roles are frequently compromised by the crown's relentless demands. Her children, particularly Charlotte, have always been under the public microscope. Every gesture, every word, every public appearance is dissected by both the media and the public. This reality is something that Kate, raised in a much more private and independent family, was not fully prepared for. Kate's maternal instincts have always been a defining feature of her public life. Whether it's her tireless charity work focused on early childhood development or her visible closeness to her children, she has made it clear that being a mother is her most cherished role. But that role, especially within the confines of the royal family, has its limits. And those limits are beginning to show as Charlotte's own voice begins to break through the royal facade. Kate, like many mothers, faces a constant tension between protecting her children and supporting her husband. In an ideal world, she would have the space to comfort Charlotte, to support her in expressing her feelings freely. But the palace, as much as it is a family home, is also a political institution. And in that institution, loyalty to the crown often trumps loyalty to personal feelings. Sources close to the family suggest that when Charlotte spoke out about the slap, Kate was caught in a difficult position. On one hand, she has always been William's strongest ally, publicly and privately. Their partnership is one that has been built on mutual respect, shared responsibilities, and an understanding of the weight of their roles. On the other hand, as a mother, Kate cannot ignore her child's pain, especially when that pain is tied to the very person who is supposed to offer her love and protection, William himself. In private, insiders claim that Kate was deeply affected by Charlotte's words. She is described as having been devastated, not just by the implication that her husband may have been involved in a physical confrontation with their daughter, but by the emotional weight of what that meant for their family. Kate's reaction, though private, was reportedly a mix of disbelief and concern. According to one confidant, Kate spent hours alone in the palace, processing what Charlotte had said and considering how best to navigate the situation without causing further harm. But Kate's ability to act on her maternal instincts is hindered by her position. As the wife of the future king, every action she takes must be measured, every response calculated. The balance between protecting her children and maintaining public unity is fragile. If she were to confront William directly, it would risk not only her marriage but the very stability of the monarchy. If she were to publicly support Charlotte's account, it could create a public rift, not just with William, but within the royal family as a whole. In royal circles, this kind of private conflict is nothing new. Queen Elizabeth II, for instance, famously shielded her children from the press, even as her own marriage faced its tumultuous moments. Similarly, Princess Diana, though vocal about her struggles within the royal family, had to navigate the delicate balance between her public duty and her role as a mother. But in both cases, the stakes were different. Diana, though beloved, was an outsider, divorced from Charles and separated from the palace in many ways. Kate, by contrast, is firmly entrenched in the royal fold. She is expected to uphold the dignity of the family, regardless of what happens behind closed doors. Kate's dilemma is compounded by the expectations placed upon her as a future queen consort. She has spent years building her public image as a calm, composed, and supportive partner to William. Her every move is watched and analyzed. Any sign of discord between her and William could be seen as a failure, not just as a wife, but as a representative of the monarchy. In a family where appearances are paramount, Kate cannot afford to show any public sign of weakness or instability. For Kate, the moment Charlotte spoke out wasn't just a family issue, it was a crisis of identity. As a mother, her first instinct was to protect her daughter and to confront the situation head-on. But as a future queen consort, her loyalty to her husband and to the institution that would one day make him king often takes precedence. This complex web of loyalty, duty, and maternal love leaves Kate in a uniquely difficult position, one that has likely shaped her response in the aftermath of Charlotte's statement. According to sources, Kate has quietly sought advice from a select few trusted individuals, both inside and outside the royal circle. She has reportedly spoken with her family, particularly her mother, Carol Middleton, who, though supportive, has never been a part of the royal machine and cannot fully comprehend the pressures Kate faces. Other confidants suggest Kate has also sought counsel from close friends in her charity circles, individuals who know her outside the royal spotlight and understand her deep need to protect her children's well-being. But even as she seeks guidance, Kate is aware that any decision she makes will have far-reaching consequences. If she chooses to confront William directly, it could fracture their partnership and cause irreparable harm to their public image. If she chooses to stay silent, as she has in the past, she risks being complicit in perpetuating a system that prioritizes the monarchy over her children's emotional health. Her silence, at least in public, speaks volumes. Kate has not issued a statement regarding Charlotte's confession. She has not appeared to confront William about it in any overt way. Instead, she has continued her duties, attending public events with a carefully crafted smile, while behind closed doors, the cracks in her composure may be growing wider. The question now is whether Kate's loyalty to her husband will ultimately outweigh her need to protect her children. Will she continue to support him in silence, hoping this moment will fade from public consciousness? Or will she, like Charlotte, find the courage to speak out, to demand accountability for the emotional toll this royal family has inflicted on her children? The world watches, waiting for an answer that may never come. But in the silence, the tension between loyalty and motherhood is palpable. Kate may be poised to make a decision that will forever change her role within the royal family. In her relationship with the very institution that has both defined and confined her. The royal family, for all its elegance and tradition, is not immune to fractures. Behind the perfect facade of smiling faces, royal duties, and historic pomp lies a complex network of relationships, power struggles, and deep-seated tensions. The very institution that demands unity often masks the cracks that form within the family itself. Charlotte's revelation, however, has cast a harsh light on those fractures, exposing them in a way the royal family cannot ignore. For years, Prince William and his family have been the public face of royal stability. Their unity was their strength, a carefully crafted image that showcased the perfect modern royal family, loving parents, well-behaved children, and an unwavering dedication to the monarchy. But as with any family, the dynamics beneath the surface are more complicated. And Charlotte's statement, so raw and unflinching, has revealed just how much tension lies beneath the calm exterior. The conflict, as it has been emerging, seems to be not just between Charlotte and her father, but between William and a more profound legacy. The very things he learned as a child, his emotional distance from his own father, his struggles with his mother's death, have shaped the way he interacts with his children. And in those struggles, we see the passing down of generational patterns that have remained entrenched in royal life for decades. It's no secret that William's relationship with his father, King Charles, has always been strained. Charles, often depicted as emotionally distant and stern, never seemed to fully connect with his sons in the way that one might expect a father to do. Instead, he was often preoccupied with his own responsibilities, struggling to maintain his role as Prince of Wales while dealing with public controversies surrounding his marriage to Diana. William, who witnessed his mother's heartbreak and the collapse of his parents' marriage, was left to navigate these emotionally turbulent years on his own. And as William became a father, he vowed not to repeat the same mistakes. He worked hard to be present for his children, to create a stable home, one built on love and understanding. But the pressures of being a royal, balancing public duty with private life, are immense. And when Charlotte, his daughter, expressed her distress, the cracks in this ideal began to show. William, like his father before him, has been shaped by the constraints of the monarchy. His emotions, his reactions, have been conditioned to fit a mold that does not allow for raw, unrefined expressions of vulnerability. When he was a child, the monarchy demanded that he be composed and restrained. There was no room for grief, for frustration, for confusion. He learned to hide his emotions, to mask them with a calm exterior that would be scrutinized by the public and press.